2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe Libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Robert, the Last Nighters, and we're going to talk about Planet of the Apes tonight. You can find the show notes more at lastnighters.com/23. And let's say hello to Robert for a moment before we get into the Google description and then start talking about Planet of the Apes. And I think we're going to mostly focus on the original from 50 years ago, but we're probably not going to go back to this well, so we can talk about any of the other ones in the series as well. But how you doing, Robert? And then we'll get into the show.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another episode. Yeah, I'm doing great. Let's get into this.
Tonight we're going to go way back, way back, 50 years back, in fact, to the Planet of the Apes. All right, so here we go. 1968. Planet of the Apes thriller cult film, hour and 55 minutes, 8 out of 10 on the IMDb, 89% Rotten Tomatoes, 79% Metacritic, and 86% of the Google users like it. The description reads as thus: complex sociological themes run through this science fiction classic about 3 astronauts marooned on a futuristic planet where apes rule and humans drool. Are slaves. The stunned trio discovers that these highly intellectual simians can both walk upright and talk. They have even established a class system and a political structure. The astronauts suddenly find themselves a part of a devalued species trapped and imprisoned by the apes. Came out March 27, 1968. Directors Franklin J. Schaffner and Rod Serling was one of the screenplay persons. And it, of course, stars, out of my cold, dead hands, Charlton Chuck Heston.
Yeah, boy, does this movie ever beat you over the head with its sociological themes. This is the most thinly veiled argument for man as brutal, racist, just man as beast, cruel, that kind of thing. It's written all throughout this script, and it's not even the slightest bit veiled. Most of it, especially towards the end, is just a big, long diatribe about how terrible humankind is. But yeah, it's fun. It's a fun movie. It's made back in 1968. This movie actually won an Academy Award for makeup, and I would say that the makeup is pretty damn good. But in terms of like other special effects, it's all very kind of lost in space, hokey style stuff. But it's got its own kind of charm to it. Like, I completely forgive it as a modern viewer because I'm there for the story, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The Damn Dirty Apes, it's a pretty good story. And Chuck Heston's out there philosophizing, right? Time bends, and does man still make war against his brother? Meanwhile, he's smoking in the spacecraft, which I think would be a problem in a spacecraft. I don't think that would work very well.
It's not a problem if you're a boss, like Chuck Heston is. The man, he goes on a one-way mission to outer space, and the man knows enough and well enough to pack a whole bunch of cigars because he knows he's going to just be chewing on those things for the rest of the movie. The man's a beast.
I did like his devil-may-care attitude. He's like, we've got 3 days of rations, or he calls them groceries, so we better make the most of them before we die. And then they pick a direction. And he's like, well, why'd you choose this way? Dodge says that to him. He says, I don't know, I just felt like it.
Yeah, Chuck Heston in this movie is pretty awesome, especially in the beginning where the other crew members are kind of like freaking out. They're worrying about like the lady who just died and what are they going to do and how are they going to get back? And Chuck Heston's like, suck it up, pansies. Get used to this. This is your new life. This is your new reality. Get with the program. You're going to be dead in 2 minutes. Deal with it.
We're 325 light years away from that dirty old planet that we left. We're somewhere near Orion's belt and all this stuff. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And I got to say that I think that this movie took a page out of Star Trek, the television show that came out right around the same time, maybe a little bit before this. It seemed like space was a bit of a, there's the space race with Sputnik and getting the man on the moon, that kind of stuff. And so I think that there was a big interest in this type of thing. But one of the things that Star Trek did was it was like the United Colors of Benetton on TV for like the first time, right? You had Uhura and Sulu and Kirk and a bunch of, just like the myriad of races and cultures in the TV show. And you see that here with Dodge, they make there's a black guy on the screen. He's one of the three surviving astronauts, at least initially. And I thought that was like purposefully done. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying, like, for as old as this film is, it's, that they did it on purpose, and it was probably a good thing. Am I saying that right? You know what I'm saying?
You're trying to say words, and I'm listening to the words that are coming out of your mouth. But yeah, I think I know what you're sort of saying. He didn't seem like a token character. It definitely seemed like Chuck Heston's story. But what I think is a little bit more fun and interesting is that their plan was to be like essentially colonizers on, some distant planet or whatever. And their entire plan was to have one woman and 3 men, and they were going to start a whole new race, right? So essentially they're setting up just like a gangbang.
In space.
Gangbang on a new planet. For my money, this is like the way better than Star Trek. I don't think Star Trek really got into gangbangs as much as this movie did. So unfortunately, spoiler alert, the lady is already dead when they wake up. So there goes the gangbang. But luckily, they land on a planet with a whole bunch of like women who can't talk.
Oh, it's like ideal.
So it's like the greatest thing ever.
And they're fit,
Oh yeah, they look good. And they don't nag. I mean, it sounds like a paradise.
All right, and that's our misogynist moment on the Last Nighters podcast. But yeah, you're right. That is essentially the idea, and that's if everything had gone according to plan. Now, from my understanding, unless you've got twins or more going along in that bun in the oven sequence, they could only have one kid at a time, like maybe once a year and a half kind of a deal, because I know that you need a break after having a kid. So would the 3 guys just be taking turns having a new kid, and then a year and a half later another kid?
No. It's a gangbang situation, and may the best sperm win. That's how you do it, Daniel.
All right, so you never even know. I mean, well, 9 months later,
I
probably
think you
figure
would
out at least
know.
one of them.
You would have a pretty good idea if we're thinking of one in particular. Yeah.
And now the other 2, I memean, yeah, you could maybe over time go, oh, he has, Chuck's eyes, or has lobotomized dude's like horseshoe scar on his head. Because, that's genetic, right?
Absolutely it is. Well, I like the way he looked before he got the horseshoe cut out. He had like these massive, like, it was either the most ridiculous looking fake beard, or it was just this super sculpted, manicured beard and ridiculous haircut. Loved it.
All right, so my comment to that is, yes, they did an amazing job on makeup in this movie, but it was on the apes. He got like whatever they had left over that they just like glued onto his face for the 10 minutes that he was on screen for the rest of the film after the crash.
Right.
And
right. Yeah, and it was epic.
And from what I understand, they had the production took all of the makeup artists in Hollywood. Like no other film could get a makeup artist. So it was like a big supply and demand situation. Prices went up. Other films couldn't get made. So, it was like pretty crazy. And I think that they just had like some intern do his patchy beard glue face action on Landon.
Well, I mean, the apes look great, honestly. They obviously don't look as good as the current apes, who look just like real.
Right.
But for the time, and then you actually got really the only thing you can really complain about, I suppose, would be the lip movement, which looks kind of, bad. But for the time, it was a fantastic achievement. And I think you totally, I had no problem, suspending my disbelief and enjoying the movie. I mean, clearly I've watched this movie before, and it's kind of like this kind of hokey classic, but, as ham-fisted as the story is, it's still a lot of fun.
Oh, and it just devolves. It devolves from there. Like Apes 2, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, is corny. And then there's third one, I think, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, is even worse. And that's where there's humans dressed as like these cult member types. Anyway, the whole franchise just gets terrible from this one. Yeah.
Do you think that these current movies have redeemed it?
Well, I'm going to pretend that the Burton Wahlberg one didn't happen. But the three most recent, the thing that's interesting about the three most recent is they're fairly well done, and like you said, they're realistic looking apes, and it's CGI motion capture with like circus and Andy Serkis and that type of technology. And I love how it dovetails. I just finished watching War for the Planet of the Apes, and as much as I felt that one was kind of a corny one, the premise is that there's a disease that's infecting the humans that's like killing them or making them not be able to speak any longer. Like they're losing their ability to talk, which ties into, 2,000 years later, Planet of the Apes, the humans can't talk. So it gives reason for why that is.
It certainly does. Now, in that movie, though, Woody Harrelson plays this like military commander guy who has made the hard choice to murder anybody who comes down with the disease. Now, in the movie, it's not exactly clear. I mean, it seems to be that the humans don't know how the disease is spread because he just kind of kills anybody who gets it. He doesn't know who the carriers are, how it's transmitted. That's never discussed. But he thinks he's doing a good thing by killing these people to prevent everybody else from being mute. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, so you lose your ability to speak. There are people in this world who don't have the ability to speak, and it's, they live perfectly fine lives. It would be a radical change for humanity. We'd do far more texting, I suppose.
I think it's already happening naturally, honestly.
Right? Yeah. Like, how much time do we actually talk anyway? So you text, and then you have, your own like Siri voice for yourself that translates and, speaks for you, or translate, auditories your texts or something like that. But I think human beings could be just fine, honestly. So ultimately, Harrelson is kind of like a psychopathic villain in that movie, and he's less of a good guy. But I do appreciate that he thinks he's doing a good thing. How did the Harrelson villain work for you in that movie?
Well, I think that most people think that they're heroes of their own story, and so even the most violent dictators thought that they were doing a great thing. You see people on the left who virtue signal for people who don't need it, thinking that they're being a great person. You were telling me in some pre-show content that a writer on Kotaku was lamenting the fact that Steam is not shutting off some games, but recently they were lamenting that they weren't allowing like sex games on there or something. You can tell it better than I, but essentially the point is people think they're doing the right thing in general, even if they're doing something that's awful and terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just so happy that you do actually listen to me when I talk sometimes. That makes me happy. But so did that character work for you then?
It wasn't enough to make me like him or think that he was that great. Like, he didn't get a whole lot of screen time until way towards the end, and he was a bit over the top. Also, I would think that the suspicion would be that it's the apes that are maybe the origin, the vector of the disease. So the fact that he's put them in this slave camp and he's making them build this wall would put him and the people in his base in closer proximity to the potential disease-carrying apes, right? So wouldn't that be like, kind of a bad thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would think you would want to learn as much about the disease as possible, so you would quarantine as much as possible, yourself away from other people who are sick, or quarantine any suspicious, biological organisms away from you. It seemed to be more of a plot point. Like the writers just magically had, so-and-so get it because, plot reasons. So spoilers, like Harrelson gets it and then he ends up killing himself. But, for what it was as an issue in the movie, and then being able to dovetail into the original Planet of the Apes, I thought it was fine. I did appreciate that they made an attempt to do that. It's interesting that it's still alive and well 2,000 years later. Human beings still can't talk, and they've devolved into basically hunter-gatherer type peoples.
Yeah, total Ancom and Prims.
Yeah, totally and Prims.
All right, so the Harrelson thing, and then I'll move back to the 68 version. He got it because he picked up the doll that girl had given Caesar after she broke into the prison, and she had the disease. Her dad had taken her to this little hut to take care of her because otherwise she would have been killed, right? Because she had the disease.
Right.
And so that's how Harrelson ends up getting it. But
are you sure? Is that explicitly said, or is that just kind of insinuated?
It is explicitly, he picks up the doll, and then later, after he's caught the illness, they show the doll again in his quarters.
Okay. I guess I didn't quite notice that part.
Now, I did want to ask you, and then we will get back to 68. When Caesar and the other two apes approach this guy gathering wood, and the guy has, he says, I'm just going to set this wood down, and then, he's about to draw a fire at them, but they murder him, or Caesar does, right? Because Caesar's gone, like, rogue. He's gone, what was the villain in the second one?
Koba.
Koba, yeah. So he's become more and more like Koba now, so he's, like, not taking any shit. So he shoots this guy. Now, I think that the guy was going to shoot them. He was making a furtive motion. But there approaching him in his property, right? He's homesteaded that area. He lives there. So
Sure.
they're trespassers in that situation. So I think he
Right.
had every opportunity to, question them and be able to defend himself. But he ended up getting shot for it. So what are your
Right.
thoughts on that? And then we'll go back to 68.
Well, I would definitely say that, yeah, in that instance, the humans are, or the apes are, that's an act of aggression. But I mean, if you go back to the beginning of the movie, the apes and the humans are like completely at war with each other. And I don't know if, there are necessarily, if the apes even care at that point, if there are, conscientious objectors or people that aren't in on the fight or, civilians. I don't even know if that concept is even brought up in that movie. It just seems like there are, if you're a human, you're on team human. And if you're an ape, you're on team ape, unless you're a little girl that can't talk. So from my perspective, yeah, that was an act of aggression. You're murdering a guy on his own land. Sure. But from the apes' perspective, they're like, well, got another human, bagged another one. Good deal. It's another one that's not going to kill my family or whatever. So yeah, war is a horrible thing, and it takes horrific psychological toll on the victims and the victors. Anybody, and then people that aren't even involved just want to stay out of it. Hey, I'm just alone in the woods, and here you are painting me with the enemy brush. So you're gonna make an excuse to murder me. It's just a messed up situation all the way around. Now, Caesar is shown as kind of like the peacemaker, especially in the second one. He's like, man, I don't want this. But Koba, does a false flag and starts the whole war. And even in the beginning of the third one, the War for the Planet of the Apes, doesn't Caesar in the beginning kind of like want to negotiate the truce? Is like, these people are going to let these people live. Go back to your general guy and say we want enough of this. Doesn't that happen? Like we're on the hill right after that initial battle at the beginning.
Yes, yeah, he does send back a couple of survivors and offers peace.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's a complex movie. I don't think there's anybody completely innocent in it. But if the apes are basically, kind of wanting to be left alone for the most part. And a lot of, I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I'm just not exactly sure. Let's move on because I'll sit here and try and think about it. I would have to think about it more.
All right.
Exactly what the movie's trying to say. Because, like what are the motivations here? You got Harrelson who just wants to kill all the apes. Why? Are they in competition for anything? Is it just we don't like you because you don't look like us? Is it like some sort of allegory for racism? Or what is it? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I will say that by the beginning of the film, the apes, Caesar, are trying to escape the humans. So they're being pursued. And it's only after the general kills Caesar's family that Caesar and 2 or 3 of the other apes go on this mission to go and kill the colonel. And that's when they encounter this guy.
Right. And I would be in full support for Caesar to go and kill the guy that killed your family. If someone came and killed my family, I would have no issues whatsoever about killing the person that killed my family. I just wouldn't. We could debate whether or not that's the correct moral stance or not, but certain things just come down to what are you going to put up with? And I don't put up with people murdering my friends and family. Just don't.
All right, so that was War for the Planet of the Apes. Let's go back to the original that started it all. And I want to ask, with the whole philosophizing in the spacecraft time bends, does man still make war on his brother, the whole Heston stuff, he says something about the future, like they've ended up in the future. And I'm just curious if you think that he meant it's the future, as in linear, like they're just 2,000 years ahead, or is it like parallel futures and they've crossed into another stream, so it's just a possible future?
Like when the computer tells them that it's 3968?
Right, but aren't there theories that there's infinite worlds, infinite possibilities, and different dimensions, different planes, and so you could end up in a different one, and a different result would happen?
There are those theories for sure. I don't think that's what Heston was saying, or that's not necessarily what they were talking about in this movie. I did think it was interesting that, or at least weird, that Heston seemed to think that they were like, 700 and some odd million light years away from Earth or something like that. But then they are actually on Earth. So what exactly happened there? I'm not sure.
Well, he was asleep at the wheel for like 18 months.
Yeah, okay. He was traveling at near light speed for 18 months or however long they were traveling for. So they just went out and then took a U-turn and then came back. And then it was 2,000 years later. I don't know, man. But it's fine. I don't care. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to tell a story, and it's all an allegory about man's inhumanity to man. And that's fine. What did you think about because it gets pretty heavy-handed almost right off the bat as soon as Heston wakes up and he's captured, and then he wakes up in the scientist lab, and there's all of these discussions about how man is just a beast, and they're basically just unthinking. They have a cunning, but they're just mimics. They're just mimicking apes when they're trying to show that they can talk and that sort of thing. And it just reminded me of essentially human arguments about how apes are not sentient because they can just mimic. They can just learn. How birds are not sentient because they just mimic. All throughout time, scientists and other religious scholars and that sort of thing have kind of poo-pooed the idea that anything but humanity is sentient. Or that, even if you go back to like religious like origins and the Bible and that sort of thing, saying that, life only exists on Earth, when it's kind of funny that just today NASA came out and said they found life on Mars, which is interesting. So
yeah, and to that life being found point, I thought it was kind of funny in the 68 that they're trudging through the desert, and as soon as they see this tiny little plant, they're like, oh my goodness, life. And then a few minutes later, there's plants everywhere, and it's like not a big deal anymore. It's like
Right.
the first one was a huge deal, and then all of a sudden they realize that there's a bunch more, and then they end up swimming in this, they go skinny dipping in this lush forest. So
Right,
it
they
quickly
do.
lost its value because, there was tons of it everywhere.
Right. Scarcity. So yeah, you can make an economic value scale argument there. But these guys are also scientists, and they immediately just start breathing the air of some rando planet that they land on. They don't have like they don't do any sort of air testing.
Oh, they did.
And then when they did,
Yeah, when the ship was sinking, he says, hey, get an air reading, get an atmospheric reading, make sure we can breathe out there. And then when they get out onto land, they do test the soil to see if anything will grow. And apparently in that particular area, nothing would grow. So that's why they thought it was a sterile planet.
man, I got to watch these movies a little more carefully. You're kicking my ass on these details.
Yeah, you should. You should really watch these and pay attention. I did want to ask, when the ship sank, he said, going, gone. And that's like a common phrase. Do you think it originated in this film? Or did it originate in baseball, like radio announcers, home runs, going, gone, grand salami, that kind of shit?
Yeah, I think it's used far more often in baseball. They could have definitely taken it from baseball. If I had to guess, I would guess it was from baseball, and they used it in this movie. Because they used a bunch of other kind of phrases in this movie that I doubt they originated. Like Heston at one point, tells the young ape teenager, don't trust anybody over 30, and that's something that the hippies would always say. I don't know specifically what hippies, but that was like a common refrain in the 60s. So I don't know how many original thoughts this movie had, but it is a collection of thoughts, which is, they're fun. Now, what did you think about basically the argument that, man is a beast and man's always going to war against other men, and they're a bunch of racist piece of trash garbage people, and then we're going to destroy the planet?
Well, I can definitely see why they would have thought that at the time. I mean, they were in the midst of the Cold War. World War II had just ended. Vietnam was just heating up. Korea had happened in between. This was the beginning of, counterculture, the hippies and the peace and anti-war movement. And so I can definitely see a political commentary on that, where they would look upon all of those things happening at the time and being rather concerned and making a statement about them. Because those are uncivilized things, right? They do risk destroying the planet. And war is, of course, a terrible thing. So I think they had every reason to be making such comments.
Okay, well, you cut out there for about a minute, so I'm just going to have to guess what you said. But you seem to appreciate those comments and think that they were true. Is that correct? Did you think they were true, or do you just sympathize for them thinking those thoughts?
I do sympathize with them, and I hope that it recorded my portion. I believe it did.
Fantastic. But did you agree with those thoughts? Do you think man is a beast, and that we'll be at war constantly forever?
I think as long as there's belief in the state, then yes, that will be a persistent thing. But
okay.
Once we
is a man
evolve beyond that, because
do we have a beast? Go ahead.
Well, because a state lives off predation and violence, and it doesn't produce anything of its own. It can only take from the productive. And when they have the quote unquote authority to take from the productive, then all of their any natural like bellicosity that they have will be further enhanced, because they don't have to bear the cost themselves. They can just finance it by taking from others. Whereas if they had to bear the risks themselves, like in a private society where there was no state, people would incur the consequences of their actions more directly. So I think that you would see a significant drop in violence. Like, you couldn't amass the destructive power that's required for wars without a state. misallocating and stealing to get those things into a concentration.
So you're saying that Walmart death squads will not be a thing?
I am saying that is highly unlikely, yes.
Okay. Well, it reminds me of the whole, if men are angels, then you wouldn't need a government because you wouldn't need anyone to rule over anybody else because everybody would be just doing the best thing possible at all times. And if men are devils, then you couldn't possibly have a government because the people would just use government as an evil organization to rule and lord over other people. And if men are a combination of good angels and bad devils, then you definitely can't have a government because the devils would just rule and dominate over the good people. So I thought it was interesting in the movie that there was kind of a class system and there was definitely a state, and how the state, even in these apes, was hiding knowledge, hiding the truth from the rank and file citizens. And there was like all kinds of glorifications of the past, and like there's like a religion, like a state religion. It had pretty much all the trappings of current modern day governments, just recycled.
Right, but they substitute a religion for statism itself. Like most people who don't think of themselves as atheists are actually still religious. It's just that their god is the state. But in
Certainly.
Planet of the Apes '68, it's like this weird hybrid combination of they're a state, they're a religion, and they're also in charge of the scientific inquiry. And Dr. Zaius is like this combination of the three, right? He apparently is the supreme decider of these things. He's also the chief science officer, and he's also very highly up in the religious aspect. And he's the one hiding knowledge. And I think that he believed that he was doing it for the good of the ape civilization. Like he was hiding it because he thought it was better that the apes didn't know the true history, the true past.
Right, because he believes that humanity they're just beasts, and they're just the worst, and any kind of influence in like holding men above apes in any way would be detrimental to ape society. Like if we ever discovered that there was some ancient ape society that was actually technologically superior and socially superior to current modern day humanity. I mean, I don't think it would necessarily be that big of a threat, but it would be interesting to see the backlash and the response from various people. I don't think it would be in danger. I don't think it would be, like finding out that there's life on Mars. It's like people would go, huh, okay, interesting, and get on with their life. I don't think it's going to cause anybody to freak out.
I mean, unless finding out bees started talking, then we'd freak out. I mean, that's essentially what this is. Bee movie, which we did a few weeks ago. This is Bee movie, but with apes that look like Valerie Jarrett, according to Roseanne. Or one specific ape, Dr. Zira.
Well, is she wrong?
No, she's not wrong. And I wanted to ask you this. Is it really racist? I don't think it truly is, because she's talking about one individual person who I don't even think is black, who literally looks like a character from this movie. Like
saying that one thing
uncanny.
Looks like another thing is not a harmful comment to make, in my view. Now, I think it's funny that the lefty reaction to this is that Roseanne was saying that all black people look like monkeys. I saw multiple times where instead of saying this woman's name, they instead inserted people and said, black people. That Roseanne said that black people look like monkeys from Planet of the Apes, which is clearly not what she said. But even if she did, why does anybody care? This outrage culture seems like a super counterproductive thing. Like, just don't give them your time or your energy. If you think she's a racist or whatever, then ignore her. But it's these it seems to be like have a lot of power. It's almost like they love building up these straw men and giving arguments more weight than they actually have. Like the Steam thing I was talking about earlier. So they're worried that, there might be some games that promote questionable things, like violent things or racist things or whatever. Well, so there's a thing for sale on a digital marketplace that may promote some, like, let's say that there's like a white nationalist like type thing on Steam, and it promotes like a bunch of white people getting together and just having a good time and everything's awesome town and white world. Okay. So they have it for sale in a digital marketplace. Okay. How is that hurting anybody? How does it harm anybody? Are they really worried that people are going to see that game, shell out their hard-earned money for that game, and then be convinced by that, and then therefore they're going to go do something? It seems like a real, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a credible thing to me. Like, there are things out there on the internet with which you do not agree. Fine. And there's always going to be that thing. Are you really worried that those arguments are so undefeatable that you have to like violently oppose them? I don't know. Am I making any sense?
Vaguely. You generally do. I do want to point out the hypocrisy because in the 80s and early 90s, when music was put under the microscope for people committing violent acts or committing suicide, I think it was people on the left who were saying, no, they should be able to do what they want. And it was the conservatives imposing their morality upon others by wanting to restrict what music could do or say, and it had warning labels. Is that your recollection? I mean, I know Tipper Gore was involved, and she's a lefty, but I would think that most, like our growing up period of being sort of left-leaning, was more in line of the free speech, censoring things is a bad thing, that whole deal, and it feels like now the left is the entirely opposite of that.
The left is the new right. It definitely seems that way. Yeah. They are all for censorship, and, things that we don't agree with, they need to be gotten rid of. But things that we agree with, yeah, let them happen because we want to impose our morality on this thing or that thing or everything that I like or I use.
And you've said this before in a previous show. They actually have that power right now. And it doesn't even need to be violent. It could just be they pay for the things that they like, and they don't pay for the things they don't like, and the things that aren't profitable won't get made anymore. And the things that are profitable, more things like them will get made. Like, they hold the power right now.
They do. They are the vast majority. The vast, vast majority in terms of people that buy like video games. There was in the same article, they were complaining about some white identitarian like group, like a right conservative group was on Steam where they just kind of like get together and you can join and form different groups, kind of like Facebook groups. And one was like a white conservative group, or I don't even know if it was white, but it was just like a conservative group. And it said some of the, like, if you're a monarchist, I forget exactly all of the things that it said, but you're welcome here. And it showed like 84 members. And like, this is a huge problem for who? I every time they complain about one of these things, I'm always questioning who the victim is, because where's the harm in somebody making an offer to somebody else? Here is a thing. Do you want to buy it? No, you don't. Oh, now I've aggressed against you by offering a thing to you. You could make the most horrific. There was a game recently. I don't know if it's been released or not, but it was a game where you were a school shooter. So you ran around inside the school, and I don't know. I just saw a screenshot, so I'm left to imagine what the game was about. Sounds like you would go into a school and you'd try and kill as many people as possible. Now, aside from the fact that that's pretty much very similar to a lot of games, I mean, take away the fact that the people can't shoot back at you, and it's pretty similar. I mean, you're going around killing things. There's a game where, you're shooting a bunch of Nazis. There are games where you shoot just rando people. There are all kinds of games where you're going around shooting people.
You got Wolfenstein, you've got Doom, you've got Call of Duty, you've got Grand Theft Auto, those types of games.
Yeah.
GoldenEye, back when we were in college. That was a good one. James Bond.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. But even if those games, I mean, you can just imagine the most terrific content. If it's just up for sale, you don't have to buy it. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to propagate it. These people that call attention to this stuff, I mean, if there wasn't an article written about it, would you even have a clue that it existed? They're in fact probably doing better business by getting their game talked about than they ever would otherwise. But even if you did, even if the game was purchased, what they're really afraid of is that someone's going to buy the game and like be convinced by the argument of the game. It's the same argument that the left used against, in defense of like Marilyn Manson's music or rap music back in the day when they were whining about, the whole fuck the police type stuff.
Judas Priest.
Like, yeah, people are going to listen to this and then they're going to go out and do it because people are mindless automatons just waiting to be programmed by whatever. And I think if you're a radical individualist like myself and realize that people have self-ownership and they're responsible for their own actions, that you can't just sit there and go, oh, well, he went and killed this person and it was because he listened to this song. It strips that person of any responsibility for their own actions. Oh, it wasn't my fault. I heard this one song one time, or I played this video game one time, and now I had to go murder a bunch of people. It's a ridiculous argument, and it's completely unconvincing to me. But we should probably talk about this movie.
Yeah, get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. So
what did you think of Heston's acting? Because I thought it wasn't too bad.
But
he's not he's a fairly wooden guy.
Yeah, he was a bit over the top, especially in his laugh when that one dude like planted a little flag. He just laughs maniacally into the sky. And it's like for a couple of beats too long, it just stands out as really awkward.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely awkward. It's a madhouse. It's a madhouse.
So, back now that we're talking about the film again, I thought it was interesting how the Ancom type humans were being hunted by the apes. And of course, Dodge, the black astronaut, he got shot by the apes in the back. And those were the blue-vested ape cops. So I thought, par for the course, right?
Do you think it was trying to make a comment on that back in the day?
No. But speaking of blue vests, there's a guy who's famous now, social media type, named DeRay. I don't really know much about him, but he claimed that the blue-vested character in War for the Planet of the Apes was a derogatory slight directed at him as an individual.
So he goes around wearing a blue vest?
Yes, he's known for it.
He thinks the makers of the movie knew him and tried to make a comment about him?
I think so, yeah. I think that was the story. And then people pointed out to him, well, Planet of the Apes came out 48 years prior and well before you were born, and they had blue vests. So maybe you got the idea from the Planet of the Apes movie to wear the blue vest.
Or maybe the producers of the Planet of the Apes 1968 were wizards.
They bent
and
time.
Knew the future and knew that this guy would be big, and that's why they did it.
All right, so one other point, and we're almost to an hour, so we've hardly talked about this movie. But when they were skinny dipping, when they got out of the water...
Did you get an erection?
It's almost related to that. Did you find it awkward when Chuck Heston's standing there and the other two dudes bend down?
Did they?
They did, yeah. It looked like, you could GIF it and it would be like total innuendo. It's bizarre. I'll try to make a GIF out of it and send it to you. But anyway, it stood out to me.
Looking forward to that.
As freaking awkward.
Love it. Well, what's a good movie from the 60s without a skinny dipping scene of three men? What's wrong with that? I don't know. It made sense inside the plot, and then they had to get their clothes off him somehow. So there wasn't the girl around to do the orgy scene. So they had to get their clothes off somehow, and they just have him running through a desert, by a watering hole, but they didn't really understand why. I didn't understand why the other people were like stealing their clothes. Like what use did they have for some old clothes?
Well, they were Ancoms. They were stealing the means of production.
Okay.
Like they were savages, right? And they were it was something new and unique, and so they were taking it and looking through it, rifling through it, destroying it because it was something they'd never seen before.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just curious. And,
okay.
Also, when the humans were being hunted and they were stringing them up and taking photos in front of them, I thought that was just like genius and crazy and, just fun.
You liked it?
Well, not in the, I wish that happened, but, I found it funny.
Well, it seemed to be a commentary on trophy hunters. I didn't really quite understand why they were capturing these people in the first place. Other than scientific research, but they didn't really seem to have them be doing anything otherwise. Like they weren't capturing them for slave labor or anything.
Right? It seemed like
zoos,
game
zoos
hunting.
and science, which I suppose is real.
Yeah, just game hunting. Though it didn't seem like they fought back really. Of course, that really doesn't happen now when people are like hunting deer and whatnot. But anyway, it's beside the point.
Indeed.
I did want to talk about Dr. Zaius again a little bit because he's a fucking charlatan, religious, scientific politician he held the purse strings on this quota system for ape science funding. I don't know if you paid attention to this point, but Cornelius and Zira were talking, and Cornelius said, "Oh, well, you got funded because of the quota system."
No, I was not. I did not hear this part. So if you got a point to make, go for it.
Well, it's just when the state is so involved and also religion is so involved in this society, the ape society, then it is a favor system and quotas need to be made and met. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it gets in the way of how science would actually progress in a natural way, where there would be risk being taken by entrepreneurs putting funds towards something, investigating something, creating something new, learning something. It totally destroys that connection when you have these sort of involuntary funding methods, if you will.
I do will. This is out of the scope of the movie, but there were, realistic kind of questions, like how do the apes not know about flight? What is the economy in this world? what does get made? Where does it get made? I got questions, man. I think the later movies do a little bit better job on that. But for the scope of the movie, I really can't fault it too much because it was just a fun time, except for the whole heavy-handed like socio-political commentary.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the final summary and review, I did want to ask you about the Kangaroo Court situation where Heston was being tried and he wasn't allowed to speak, and they did the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil thing from the tribunal. And apparently that was ad-libbed on the day. They didn't plan that. They did it and it made the cut. And I think that it was like one of the standout moments because the Kangaroo Court was totally a railroading. They weren't actually seeking justice. They were just seeking to ceremonize. How am I saying this right? They were seeking to follow a certain ceremony to fulfill some obligations, make sure certain steps were taken to get the outcome, the verdict that they desired. Like it was not a fair trial.
In other words, it's a kangaroo court, like you said.
Well, yeah. I'm just over-explaining it and butchering words in the process.
Sure, absolutely. I did appreciate that, Heston was a man and therefore he had no rights in ape court. I think that would be appropriate. I don't think a monkey or an ape or a baboon or an orangutan or anything like that would have rights
or a bee
in a human court.
Or a bee.
Well, now if the bee could talk, then I would want. I'm on record, man, saying that once
I've got the documents.
Once a creature demonstrates its sentience, then you got to respect that, man. I think you got to, or else why would they respect yours? So if Heston establishes his sentience by speaking, by clearly demonstrating thoughts that he is having, regardless of whether or not you agree with those thoughts, you would have to at least assume or believe that he is a thinking, conscious creature, and therefore grant him the same rights.
And by grant, just respect, like they don't bestow them,
Right.
They just exist
Right.
and they recognize them. But yeah,
Correct.
he would, by demonstrating his ability to rationally think and express himself, he would establish that he has natural rights that should be respected by others.
Right, and we talked about this in the bee episode, where if bees started talking tomorrow, like as of today, if you crush a bee, nobody cares, and nobody should care. But if tomorrow, after they've established that they can talk and they can think and speak and they're rational creatures that are conscious and sentient, if you crush a bee, you basically just committed murder.
I'll agree. Circle gets the square. And you know what? I think that may be one of the things motivating Zaius is he's in denial. Like he's trying to railroad this guy and not recognize his natural rights because he's afraid that the humans are going to start being able to speak and assert their dominance again on the planet. And so that's why he's protecting, he's trying to protect his civilization, I think, now that we've talked this through a little bit. Like he sees this as an imminent threat that men can now talk, and he knows the history of men and how they were warlike and ended up killing themselves off.
Right. And he sees that future possibly coming true for his own species if mankind should, rise back to prominence or whatever. I'm not exactly clear exactly what Zaius has in his mind of what the threat exactly is, or if it's a culture that is so fragile that the slightest bit of new information sends it into a tailspin.
Yeah, he definitely was the Oz behind the curtain.
For sure. Now,
trying to hold it all together.
Now, you just agreed with me earlier about basically, not your rights are not granted by others, right? You establish that you are a sentient creature and therefore you have natural given rights. I have heard it said that libertarianism is a philosophy for human beings. For me, that's not enough. For me, it's the philosophy of sentient beings. Now, where are you? I mean, because you did just agree with me. So are you going to completely agree with me, or are you going to go back and kind of defend the human idea?
Well, to date, I believe that humans are the only ones who have established that level of sentience, but I would agree with you that if you take it to the logical conclusion that if some other entity was able to, at some point, establish a similar level of sentience and that they are able to rationally think and communicate, then they would establish that they, too, have natural rights that should be respected.
Excellent.
But I would also say that in current society, the negative rights of natural rights of people respecting others' negative rights is trampled on constantly, and that is in normal society.
Yes.
But I digress. That's why we have the libertarianism. All right, so let's get to the end of the film and then do our final summary and review. So end of the film, they go to this cave, and Zaius basically reveals that he's aware that humans were more advanced and that he was hiding it from the ape civilization. And then he allows Chuck Heston and Notaki Hadi to escape along the beach to where they discover that they are not, in fact, 320 million or 320 light years from Earth on the third star from the belt of Orion. They are, in fact, on Earth when they see this Statue of Liberty.
Indeed, big reveal. Classically spoofed in Spaceballs. There's some interesting things that happen at the end of the movie. You've got these kind of true believer scientist people who still think Zaius isn't a lost cause, who think that if they can just convince him that there was a human civilization in the past, that all their ideas would be vindicated and they wouldn't be tried for heresy and all this. It's the classic, like, appealing to authority. Like, if I can just convince this other person that I'm granting this authority over me. It's really putting your fate in the hands of others, and it really annoys me that so many people do this. I mean, it's a realistic, pragmatic move. You know, the world we live in, there are these people called judges or politicians or whatever who have the power. But for me, I'm like, well, all your power is predicated on violence, and it's completely horseshit. So why would I give a shit trying to convince you to hopefully change your mind to maybe be nicer to me? It's seems like a waste of time. And of course, Zaius knew all along, and he tries them for heresy anyway, and all of their efforts go to naught. So hopefully they learned their lesson there. Probably not, but hopefully they do. I suppose it's a pretty decent lesson at the end of the movie there. And then, of course, it is Earth. And it's strange that the Statue of Liberty, which is like made out of copper, and copper actually degrades fairly quickly in geologic terms. So the idea that the Statue of Liberty would still exist and nothing else would is kind of funny. But, for iconic purposes, it's a good enough choice. It's certainly stuck in the culture, in the universal mind of man. But I don't know. Was it a big reveal at the end? It seemed to me like it was kind of telegraphing the ending the entire time. Like, yeah, there was mankind before. So how would there be man on this distant planet and apes on this distant planet? Sure seems like you're on Earth the whole time there, Chuck. But what do I know? I mean, I grew up, having already known the ending before I saw it for the very first time. And of course, this wasn't even the first time I saw it. So do you think, Daniel, would this ending have like blown away the minds of like an audience in 1968? Or did you think that it was like telegraphed the whole time?
I think that you would suspend the disbelief and be able to believe that they were on another planet. I mean, you're told they're on another planet, right? You're told that they're 320 light years away. And if that's the premise of the story, then until they reveal it at the end, you would likely believe it, I think. Yeah.
So in your mind, then, how did human beings get to this distant planet? And how did apes get to this distant planet? Because those are two species that are pretty unique to Earth.
Well, I mean, we're really running out of time here, but because it was in the story that they were 320 light years away and that there were other life forms there that just happened to be human and apes, I think that that's believable enough. I mean, you see it, we referenced Star Trek earlier. There's many humanoid alien species in Star Trek. And who knows, out of the infinite expanse of the universe, what other civilizations might exist. And when time bends, Robert, time bends, and there's, interdimensional planes and interstellar, and you're in a bookshelf and all that stuff.
Oh, right, interstellar, sure. And flippy floppy robots. That's right.
That's right.
With the bookshelf.
We're bringing it all together.
I forgot about the bookshelf. Okay, you're right. You're absolutely right. Humans are extra fifth dimensional organisms and can pass through time and space at any given time. So sure. Okay,
right.
You win.
So back to the point on Zaius, you mentioned appeal to authority, and I think maybe you meant to say it slightly differently, because an appeal to authority is to refer to someone who said something about something and take it because of who they are or whatever credentials they have. I think you were saying appealing to him because he was an authority figure to them. Like they were trying to gain his favor and they were trying to use rational arguments and logic, but he was strongly invested in ignoring any logical argument so long as it supported, the ignoring it would support his continued ability to be in a position of authority, right? Like it's similar to the argument or the quip that when you're debating somebody, you can't ever expect them to see the facts and the point that you're making if their paycheck depends on them not seeing it.
Right, which is like going into a court these days in arguing against the legitimacy of that court. They're not going to just go, oh yeah, I guess my whole life is predicated on bullshit. I'm sorry, everyone's free to go. This is not going to happen. I might still do it, but yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, let's wrap this up.
All right, well, I do have one quote. It's Ludwig von Mises that's sort of related to this. And he said, "No one should expect that any logical argument or any experience could ever shake the almost religious fervor of those who believe in salvation through spending and credit expansion." So the last part doesn't really tie in, but the first part does.
Okay, yeah, the last part not so much.
But it's,
But Daniel, why don't you start off with your final summary and review?
All right, so my final summary and review is that I feel like Planet of the Apes, the original one, is an iconic, classic cult film, and it still stands up to this day. It is corny in some bits, but Chuck Heston is the man. I think that it was popular at the time enough to have subsequent movies come out in degrading quality. It devolved from there. 2001, a remake. I guess happened. I haven't seen it, don't want to. I hear it's terrible. And then the new reboot ties it all together, makes it a circle in the flow, like Kevin Nealon in Happy Gilmore. You know, the circle, the flow, the energy. It brings it all together. So I think that Planet of the Apes is a great movie, and I'm going to give it a 7.5 from me.
Very good, Daniel. Yes, it is. It's like a circle. It rhymes. It's poetry. 1968 Planet of the Apes holds up surprisingly well. The special effects, I mean, there's a series. There's at one point they're running through a desert, and all of a sudden these giant boulders come tumbling down this dune. And you know that makes no sense, but okay. But you forgive it because it's just a fun ride. And, you know, for my money, the commentary is a little bit hokey. It's a little bit on the nose, but there's a reason why this is like a classic. And I think it does hold up. And Chuck Heston is the man. Even if he isn't the best actor, he has there's something about him that carries through the movie. The supporting cast is also excellent. The special effects, along with the costuming and the makeup, all still quite good. You know, the acting varies in quality. Some of the supporting actors not super great. I'm thinking of some of the people that played the apes in the jailhouse. Not super great. Some of the other guys, but. Does the movie, you know, have a message that resonates today? For me, maybe a little bit. Not super great, but I'm kind of rambling at this point, so I'm just gonna say that this movie is about it's a 7. It's a 7, and everybody should check it out if you haven't. If you're just familiar with the modern movies and you like those, go back and watch the original. It's a strong starting point. I don't know if, like Daniel says, the sequels to that were made also in the 60s and the 70s were worth watching. I don't know. Probably not. So, but at least watch the 68 to get a feel for the base of what we're seeing these days. So a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think that seeing this one and then the 3 newer ones would be sufficient for seeing the quality films. If you want the full canon, then yes, go ahead and watch the other ones with the other ridiculousness. All right, let's get off our soapbox and talk about what's coming up on our next episode. The Incredibles 2 is coming out next week on June 15th, so we are going to go to The Incredibles 1 and talk about that on our next show. So that should be exciting. It's one I can watch with the kids.
Yeah, Incredibles 1, the best Fantastic Four movie ever made. Should be a lot of fun. Really good movie. But, you know, I also saw it, when did the first one come out? 2003 or 4 or something like that?
We'll get into it next week.
Yeah, we'll find out. It was a while ago, but still pretty good.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
Same bat time, same bat station. Tune in next week, and we will get into The Incredibles. But that's all the time we have for the show tonight. So this is our episode on Planet of the Apes. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/23. Go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe, all those other good social media type thingies. We would appreciate it. Any feedback you got. We are on the anchor.fm, and you can send us a message there, and we would love to respond to any comments that we receive. We will even play it on the show. So how about that? I appreciate you joining us, and bid you adieu. Good night from last night.